The movie starts with Officer Mills meeting Detective Somerset while he's examining a crime scene. Mills has just been transferred to Somerset's precinct, and he's expected to take over Somerset's work when he retires in just 7 days. After they leave the crime scene, Somerset seems confused by Mills' motivation to suddenly change where he works. However, Mills says he only wants to do something different. The next day, Somerset and Mills head over to a crime scene where an obese man has been reported dead. As they check around the house, they see that the man died with his face inside a plate of spaghetti. While Mills starts bringing up theories on what possibly happened to the man, Somerset keeps moving around. After a while, they eventually figure out that the man's hands and legs were tied up before he died. With this, they determine that he was killed. As the doctor then comes in to examine the dead man, Somerset tells Mills to leave the scene and question the neighbors to find out if anyone saw anything. Mills doesn't seem to like this because he feels Somerset is sending him away, but he still does as he's asked. Later that day, while on their way to the forensics lab, Mills tells Somerset how he really felt about being sent away. However, Somerset says it wasn't his intention to cause any problems, and that Mills shouldn't be bothered about something like that. When they arrive at the lab, the detectives learn that the man likely ate a lot of food until he died. They also find a gun mark on his head, indicating that he was threatened with a gun before he died. After they leave the lab, they head back to the precinct to meet the police captain. As Somerset mentions the circumstances of the murder, he tells the captain that there might still be more cases like that because the killer obviously spent more time than usual trying to kill the obese guy. He also says he doesn't want to take it as his last case because he knows how such cases always go on for a long time. The captain doesn't like this suggestion, but Somerset says he only has 6 days left before retiring, and then he wants something else. He also suggests not giving the case to Mills as his first case, but the new detective doesn't like it. He insists that he wants it, but the captain just tells him to leave. He then tries to convince Somerset, but his mind is already made up. The next day, a defense attorney named Eli turns up dead in his office. Mills is assigned to the case, and as he gets there, he sees the word greed written on the floor with Ella's blood. As he starts wondering what could have possibly happened, he sees a portrait with the eyes of Ella's wife circled with blood. Elsewhere, the police captain meets Somerset in his office and tells him about Ella's death. Even though Somerset is shocked, he still remains firm on the fact that he's not getting involved in any serious case. The captain then tries to convince him to stay, but he rejects the offer. Before he leaves, though, the captain gives Somerset a bottle containing plastics, which the coroner found in the obese man's stomach. As he believes there's more to it, Somerset returns to the crime scene. While looking around, he sees where the plastics came from and realizes that the refrigerator was moved at some point during the murder. As he then moves it to see what's behind, he sees a note on the wall, as well as the inscription of the word gluttony. Immediately, he returns to the office and shows a picture of it to Mills and the captain. He also shows them the note, which suggests that it's just the beginning. He adds that gluttony and greed are 2 of the 7 deadly sins from a popular book. He mentions the other sins as sloth, wrath, lust, pride, and envy. As Mills and the captain are shocked, Somerset says it means there'll still be 5 murders. However, he leaves and says he still doesn't want the case, though Mills looks interested. Later that night, Somerset can't sleep, so he goes to the library and does some research on the 7 deadly sins. He also compiles a list of books and other important details that could help Mills with the case. Before heading back home, he drops it on Mills' table so he can find it. The next day, Mills starts finding the books, and when he later returns to work, he sits in the same office as Somerset. After a while, the phone rings, and when Mills answers it, it turns out to be his wife, Tracy. She speaks to him for a while and then tells him to give the phone to Somerset. Even though he's confused as to what she wants to tell him, Mills still gives the phone to Somerset. As he then speaks to Tracy, she invites him for dinner, and even though he initially hesitates, Somerset eventually agrees. That night, Somerset then follows Mills home for dinner. When they get there, Tracy welcomes him nicely. Shortly after, she serves the meal, and they all eat. After they're through, Tracy asks Somerset why he's not married yet. He says he was close once, but it never seemed like it was meant to be. Somerset then asks Tracy if she's enjoying the new city. As she seems to have doubts about what to say, the house suddenly starts vibrating, and Mills says the subway is close to the house. He also mentions that they didn't know before they got the place because the house agent was cunning. This sounds really funny to Somerset, and he laughs really hard, with Tracy also joining him while Mills doesn't seem to understand why they're laughing. After dinner, Mills then shows Somerset the things he has found for the Eli murder case. As they take a look at it together, they start wondering how the murderer managed to get past security to enter the building while also avoiding witnesses when he was leaving. Mills then thanks Somerset for helping with the case, but he says he's just satisfying his curiosity. After a while, Mills remembers the picture of Ella's wife he saw. He shows it to Somerset, and the old detective says she might have seen something. They then head over to meet Ella's wife to look at the pictures from Ella's office. As she cries while looking at them, she suddenly notices that one of the paintings in the office is upside down. Immediately, Somerset and Mills head back there. After bringing down the painting and tearing the back to see if there's anything there, the men find nothing. However, Somerset notices something on the wall, and as he checks it, he sees that it's a series of fingerprints used to write "Help me" on the wall. The detectives immediately call the forensic lab to run the prints and see if there's a match. As they wait for the results, Somerset implies that there might still be more to the case, but Mills says he knows they're getting close to finding the killer. When they wake up in the morning, they meet the police captain, who tells them that they have found a match for the prints. Shortly after, he briefs his squad on the suspect, whose name is Victor. As he talks about Victor's criminal past, the captain says the man has gone off the radar for a while. He then leads his team to Victor's house to arrest him for the murders. On their way, Somerset doesn't look convinced, but he says nothing. When they get there, the SWAT team immediately breaks in, only to find a man tied to the bed, with parts of his body scraped off. There's also the word "sloth" on the wall, as Mills then sees a couple of Victor's pictures, which indicate that he has been tied to the bed and tortured for a whole year. He and Somerset can't seem to believe what they're dealing with. When one of the cops takes a closer look at Victor and whispers that he got what he deserves, he suddenly wakes up and scares everyone in the room. After a while, Victor is taken away in an ambulance. However, it turns out that he can't help with any information because his tongue has been chopped off. Meanwhile, Mills complains to Somerset and mentions that the murderer is playing with them. As he seems unsettled, Somerset tells him that it's important not to let his emotions get in the way. Just then, a photographer shows up and takes their picture. Mills immediately chases the man out, and as he says he doesn't know how the press gets information so fast, Somerset says some cops at the precinct get paid by the press. That night, Tracy calls Somerset and says she wants to see him privately. He agrees to this, and the next day, they meet at a restaurant. There, Tracy tells him about how she's not happy in the new city. She also mentions that she's pregnant, though she's still unsure if she wants to keep it because she hates the city. Somerset looks shocked and says he's not the right person to discuss such a topic with. However, she says she has nowhere else to go. He then tells her that if she doesn't want to keep the baby, she should never let Mills know she got pregnant. He adds that if she wants to keep it, she should love the baby as much as possible. After a while, he has to leave for work, and there Mills sounds impatient because they don't have any clues on how to find their serial killer. Suddenly, Somerset comes up with an idea and asks Mills for some cash. They then head to a pizza place where Somerset gives the cash to a man who says he'll return with what they need in an hour. While waiting, Mills looks impatient and asks who the man is. Even though Somerset doesn't initially want to say anything, he mentions that the man is an FBI agent who will help them get a list of people who have been reading books about the 7 deadly sins. After they get the list, the name John Doe stands out because he has borrowed the book from a nearby library many times. They then trace the man's address and head over to find his apartment. When they knock on the door, though, a man suddenly sees them from down the hallway and shoots at them. As he then runs away, Mills quickly follows him. Somerset also decides to take a different route, but he's too slow. Meanwhile, Mills continues to chase John until he runs outside. At this point, he doesn't find John, so he starts walking slowly. Out of nowhere, John hits Mills with a metal that injures him. As he then struggles to get up, John points a gun at him. However, he decides to spare Mills' life and runs away before Somerset arrives. Despite having his life spared, Mills gets angry that they didn't catch John. He eventually breaks into John's apartment with Somerset. There, they then find several sharp objects, including souvenirs from each person he has already killed. After a while, Mills also finds a room with several photos of John's victims. Quite interestingly, Mills also sees his picture there, and he realizes that John was the photographer who came to the crime scene the other day. He quickly informs Somerset and mentions that they almost had him. Shortly after, a phone starts ringing in the house and Mills finds it. As he answers it, it turns out to be John, who says he admires the police for their good work. He also mentions that he's impressed that they could find him. John adds that he's changing his schedule because of what happened, and that there's still much more to come. As he ends the call, Somerset and Mills start wondering what John might do next. After they leave John's house, they get a call about another murder nearby. When they get there, they see the word "lust" on the wall. They also learn that John had forced a man to kill his lover. The man is visibly shaken, and he can't even explain what happened really well because of how traumatizing the experience was. The next day, John calls the police to report another murder. Mills and Somerset immediately head over there and see that the victim's sin is pride. After they leave the scene, Somerset says he's going to postpone his retirement until the case ends. He then tells Mills to allow him to remain his partner for a few days. As they walk into the precinct, John follows them and calls their attention until they turn back and see him with blood on his hands. They immediately get him arrested, but he says he wants his lawyer. While he's then talking to his lawyer, Mills and Somerset can't believe John would turn himself in after what he did. They also agree that he's trying to mess with them because there might still be more murders they don't know about. Shortly after, his lawyer comes out and says his client has agreed to confess to his crimes as long as Mills and Somerset follow him to get the 2 other bodies for envy and wrath. He also says that if they don't agree, John will plead insanity and get away with what he did. This leaves the detectives with no other option, so their captain advises them to take the offer and follow John. Later that day, Mills and Somerset then get wired up before leaving with John inside a car. As he's directing them to where they'll find the bodies, Somerset asks John to tell them about himself since he doesn't have anything to lose again. John then says who he is doesn't matter. Mills also asks if John really has two bodies waiting for them somewhere. He believes it's unlikely because it won't be as shocking as John would want. However, John says what he's doing is only to get people's attention. Mills asks why he thinks he's special, but he says he's not. He adds that the only thing special about him is his work. Mills doesn't think so, and he says no one will remember it in a few days. However, John says it's impossible because when he's through, people will be unable to comprehend everything he did. He also adds that he particularly like to see what Mills thinks of it when he's done. After a while, Mills asks John if he thinks of himself as insane. John then says he's not insane, and that God chose him to rid the world of sin. As Mills doesn't understand this, John mentions that all the victims are sinners who had to die for their crimes. Somerset then asks why he enjoys it since it's God's work. John says he's allowed to enjoy his work, and that it's the same satisfaction and enjoyment Mills would get if he had the chance to kill him. Shortly after, John tells them to stop in the middle of nowhere. John asks Somerset for the time, and as he hears that it's 7, he says they're right on time. As he then leads the detectives to where the bodies are, Somerset sees a bus heading down the road. He then leaves Mills with John while he goes to see who's driving the bus. He eventually stops the bus and sees that it's just a delivery guy who says he has a delivery for Mills. Somerset is shocked by this, but the delivery guy says that someone paid him to bring the package to Mills at exactly 7. Somerset eventually lets the delivery guy leave on foot. As he then examines the package and opens it, he sees something that leaves him terrified. Almost immediately, he starts running back and tells Mills to drop his gun. Mills can't hear him because he's far away, and just then, John says he advised Mills' life. He says he meant it when he said he admires the work of the police because even with their work, they have a family. Mills doesn't understand what John is saying, but the serial killer then mentions that he went to Mills' house to play husband with Tracy because he wanted to know how it felt to have a family. He also mentions that he eventually left the house with a souvenir, which was her head. Mills can't believe this, but as Somerset gets there, he asks him to confirm what's in the box. Somerset just tells him to drop the gun, and Mills realizes that Tracy's head is in the box. He looks devastated by this but keeps himself from shooting. John then says Tracy begged for her life and that of the baby inside her. Mills looks shocked to hear this, and Somerset realizes that Tracy didn't tell her husband about the pregnancy. John laughs at this and tells Mills that he has to become wrath by killing him. However, Somerset begs him not to do it because it's what John wants. He adds that if John dies, he'll get exactly what he wants. Mills looks terrified and can't believe everything that has happened. Just then, he shoots John several times until he dies, leaving Somerset disappointed because Mills will now be jailed for killing someone. That night, Mills gets arrested, and as he's being taken away, Somerset begs the prison warden to take care of him. After the warden says he will, he asks where Somerset will be, and he says he'll still be sticking around. Thank you for watching our movie recap. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to press the bell icon to stay updated with our latest content. See you in the next recap.